Okay, guys, this is the oral read of High School Teammates Carry On. He didn't know they were gone. Staring down at the sheets of his bed, the morphine starting to fade, Leroy Sutton was still numb, but he had a feeling something was wrong. It was when I tried to sit up, Leroy said, remembering that day 8 years ago. I pulled the covers up, and that's when I figured everything out. It was December 7th, 2001, the day that shaped Leroy's body and his life. He was 11 years old at the time, walking to school with his brother along the Wheeling and Lake Erie railroad tracks near his home in East Akron, Ohio. A freight train approached, and Leroy got too close. His backpack got caught on one of the passing cars and he was pulled beneath the wheels. I didn't even look down, said Leroy, now 19, recalling the first moments afterwards. I was just staring at the sun the whole time. I wasn't trying to look down because that's when I knew I would have panicked. The paramedics who arrived within minutes saved Leroy's life, but the doctors could not save his entire body. At Children's Hospital in Akron, his left leg was amputated below the knee, his right leg below the hip. He knew what had happened, but he didn't understand what he'd lost until a day later when he lifted the sheets and looked down. As the memory came back to him, his voice dropped and his head dipped. The whole time I was in the hospital, I just asked, "Why? Why?" he said. Every night I could not go to sleep because when I tried, I ended up hearing the sound of a train. Leroy left the hospital a month and a half later. He endured long, difficult hours of rehabilitation. He accepted that a wheelchair would be part of his life, but he was determined to make it a small part. I did not want to be in my chair, he said. I had to build my arm muscles up so I could move around. I move around in my arms a lot. That ability to move, to flip, and twist his body led him to a place few expected and into a friendship few could have foreseen. Leroy, don't forget your shoes. Others look down, duped. Leroy just smiles. You just can't see them. In January 2008, midway through his junior year in high school, Leroy transferred to Lincoln West High in Cleveland. By the time he was a senior, he was a familiar sight, his wheelchair flying down the hallways with a familiar refrain, his laughter booming off the lockers. When he decided to join the wrestling team, just as he'd done at his previous school, the coaches welcomed him. They knew his story and were eager to tap his strength. I told him, "You've been hit by a train. What else? What kid? What wrestler? What can stop you?" said Lincoln West coach Torrance Robinson. At Leroy's first practice, his first partner was the only other wrestler on the team powerful enough to handle him. D'Artagnan Crockett was Lincoln's best and strongest talent. He was 5'10" with muscles bunched like walnuts and already a winner in multiple weight classes. But when Leroy hopped off his chair and onto the wrestling mat, the competition was more than D'Artagnan expected. He was a complete powerhouse, D'Artagnan said, recalling their first drills together. I never wrestled anyone as strong as him. We pushed each other to our limits and we didn't let each other give up. Hour after hour, month after month, practices connected them in ways that went beyond the gym. They went everywhere together, between classes, on team bus rides, at each other's houses, both dialed into a wavelength few others could hear. They spontaneously broke into songs only they knew. They performed imaginary superhero moves they invented. They laughed at jokes and words only they understood. Yet, their simplest connection was one everyone saw and no one anticipated. Not even Leroy and D'Artagnan know exactly when or how it first happened. One day I'm coming out of my office, said Cairo Taylor, the school's powerlifting coach. I look over to the corner of the gym where the mats are at, and right up the steps I see D'Artagnan with something on his back. And the closer I get, I'm like, is that Leroy? And it was Leroy on his back. D'Artagnan's carrying him. It was not a one-time ride. D'Artagnan lifted Leroy on his back and carried him to and from every match, on and off every bus, into and out of every season, every gym all season long. At more than 170 pounds, Leroy was not a light load. D'Artagnan never cared, and carrying never stopped. Most of the time, we wouldn't get a wheelchair lift, so I would have to carry him on the bus, take his wheelchair apart, put it on the bus, then carry him off the bus, he said, and then into the building and up the stairs. D'Artagnan lifted Leroy onto his back for the playing of every national anthem and carried him down the bleachers before each match. Yet, as inseparable as they were, a team unto themselves in a way, they also shared something greater than their sport. That's because the teammate who carried Leroy on his back all season long knows about challenges himself. D'Artagnan Crockett knows because he's legally blind. D'Artagnan sings, I can see clearly now, the rain is gone. Leroy listens and corrects him, but you can't see. So, I can still sing, and they pick up the song together twice as loud. Born with Leber's disease, a condition that causes acute visual loss, D'Artagnan 18 has been severely nearsighted his entire life. He can barely make out the facial features of a person sitting 5 feet away. I'm basically blind compared to someone with 20/20 vision, he said. As a boy, his father watched him bump into the same table corners and fumble for the same objects over and over again, uncertain what was wrong. He received the diagnosis just after his son started elementary school. I wanted to grab him and help him, but I wasn't allowed to that. because the world isn't like that. Arthur Harris said, I never let him feel sorry for himself. I did feel like something was wrong with me because I was completely different from everyone, D'Artagnan said, like I was some type of a freak. Yet, as he grew older, he not only accepted the condition, but also adjusted so well to his inability to see those around him often were unaware of anything until he told them. I asked him, Are you serious? Said Lincoln West teacher and assistant wrestling coach Jim Hans. Nothing about him ever gives you the hint that he has a disability. The way he carries himself, he doesn't ask for anything. Still, there are signs. At times his eyes dart back and forth as if ricocheting between objects. Boarding the city bus for the ride to school, he asks the driver to tell him when his stop is near, unwilling to trust his glimpses of the passing landscape. In class, often he places text just inches from his face to read. On the wrestling mat, although his moves are quick and bold, he sees little more than rough shapes lunging toward him. Yet his own view of his limits remained focused and clear. I'm just seeing it as a challenge God has given me and how I'm going to react to this challenge. He said, Let it make me the person I am, or let it break me. Other trials in his life could have broken him long ago. After his mother died when he was 8, he moved in with his father, Harris, who struggled to take care of himself in the midst of an addiction to alcohol and drugs. There were times when D'Artagnan scavenged the house for food, but found none. But for most of his time in high school, he had no steady place to call home. I let him down, Harris said. It was terrible for him. Through it all, D'Artagnan stayed in school, stayed on the mat, and supported his dad's effort to stay clean. Harris, now, has been sober while working 2 full-time jobs for more than a year. That D'Artagnan would pick someone else up was no surprise. He learned to carry a father before he ever carried a friend. He made a lot of mistakes in the past, and he's learned from them, D'Artagnan said. It made our bond stronger than I could fathom. He's a great father. When the words were related to Harris, he dropped his head and began to cry. Above all, I'm glad the love never left, he said. I'm glad that stayed. D'Artagnan and Leroy move down the hallway after class. I am Darth Cripple, Leroy says. I am Blind Vader, D'Artagnan replies, and they turn a corner. Their laughter is all that's left behind. Friends joke, they jab. They can be the least flattering of critics and the loudest of supporters. So it is with D'Artagnan and Leroy. They mock each other and themselves every chance they get, in ways others would never dare. There's a sure sign of a pending joke. The pace of speech slows, and the tone becomes a notch too earnest. Leroy, in particular, has mastered the pattern. People look up to me sometimes, he said from his wheelchair. He waits, then says, Well, usually they look down to me. His laughter comes first and easiest. They constantly make fun of each other's situation because of each other's disability, Hans said, but they do it publicly because they're not afraid of their disabilities. The one place they don't laugh is in competition. Entering the gyms all season, one on top of the other, each cared as much as about the other's match as their own. With as much invested in the other's outcome, every time D'Artagnan wrestled, Leroy sat on the edge of the mat, serving as the unofficial coach and chief encourager. It's like having my brother there, D'Artagnan said. There was plenty to watch. Competing at 189 pounds in Ohio, one of the most wrestling-rich states in the country, D'Artagnan relied more on strength than technique, preferring to overwhelm foes than outpoint them. Nearly always the aggressor, he rarely waited for another's move, for a simple reason. He might never see it. So he struck first and usually firmest. He went 26-3 in his senior season, securing the league championship in his weight class. It's amazing, Robinson said. As phenomenal as he is, and he can't see. How does that happen? As for Leroy, who is unable to generate the leverage essential in wrestling, leverage gained by using the lower body that he doesn't possess, the matches were tougher and the wins more difficult. He expected nothing less than 100% from his opponents, and if he sensed any pity, he reacted with anger. Pity, he spits the word. It's more than likely that I'll punch you in the face than sit here and cry. Leroy would bounce on his hands and often flip his way onto the mat before matches. Then he would scream out. Then he would slap his hands down as hard as he could, making a thunderous echo, his smile dead, his arms wired. If some stared when Leroy entered the gym on top of D'Artagnan, even more stared as he competed. Wrestling in multiple weight classes this season, Leroy won 9 matches, the majority by pinning his opponents. In every other match, regardless of the outcome, he left a message. He never said it, but his coaches understood. Watching him wrestle, Robinson said, has taught me how to stand in areas of my life that I wouldn't have wanted to. Did you guys do the homework? The teacher asked. D'Artagnan tried, says Leroy, but he couldn't see it. So Leroy ran over, says D'Artagnan, and read it to me. It was the final night of the school year, graduation night. The people inside the theater building of Cuyahoga Community College were there for a celebration more than a ceremony, to pay tribute to an accomplishment that meant more here than in most schools in America. The majority of students at Lincoln West High School never earned a diploma. This year, the graduation rate had roughly 40%. On that early June night, the graduates gathered on a stage, their gowns flowing and their tassels poised to swing, each ready to mark a point in the journey. Leroy had dreamed of this night for a long time. My goal, he said in May, is to actually walk across the stage. No one on that stage that night understood that goal more than D'Artagnan. That's why, when Leroy's name was called, D'Artagnan stood, too, right beside him. What would you do for a friend when you've carried on your back all year long? You'd put him down and walk beside him, which was exactly what D'Artagnan did. He helped Leroy stand upon new prosthetic legs he was fitted for just weeks earlier, then moved alongside him as Leroy crossed the stage, step for step, eye to eye. When Leroy stopped, he put his hand and grasped his diploma. The audience rose and delivered a standing ovation. After the photos were taken and the music stopped and the tears dried, the two sat in the theater side by side. As long as I can remember, D'Artagnan said, I've been carrying him from point A to B to C. Graduation was the first time I finally got to walk beside him. He paused. It was a privilege. It was an honor. Leroy's eyes moistened and he looked up. It meant so much to me, he said, to know I have a friend who was there to catch me if I stumbled. There was no stumble. There was no pun or punchline, no joke or jab. They were just two friends sharing one moment, and there they lingered, smiling in silence.